Welcome! In this series of videos, we will look at software add-ons for both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at enhancing our CGI application on the Abyss web server by generating a form and using it to pass parameters back to the same CGI application to display a selected report. This was the web page coming out of our CGI application at the end of the last video. Our CGI application was called CC-CGI Demo 3. If this was called with no parameters, this is the page that would come up. This would display the first file, myfile.csv, in an HTML format. If we launch Demo 3 with a parameter, we can get it to display myfile2. However, you would not normally expect users to have to use parameters when they're calling a web page. So what we're going to do today is we're going to create a Demo 4 program, which when launched will display to the user a template page. And on that template page, they can then pick which of the two files they wish to view. So how can we do that in the code? So we've taken our Demo 3 source code and we've renamed it to Demo 4. The application at the moment takes an input in from the standard input. We then parse the parameters to work out how many parameters there are, and if there is a single parameter, we're then picking up the name of the file from that parameter. Otherwise, we're defaulting to myfile.csv. And once we've determined the file name, we're then calling a function to create the web page and pass it back to the browser. So now we will prepare our application to deliver the initial form, which the user can then decide which of the two files they wish to see. So let's, for the moment, comment out this section of code. And when the application is actually launched, we will display back to the user a template. So we'll comment out the file, and we're going to create a new function to display this index page to the user. We'll call that Create Index Page version 1. And we'll comment out the final call to create web page. Now we have a page templates folder which will sit upon the web server, which is actually read by our CGI application. We had initially one template file, user list. We're now creating a new one called index. The index one is very similar to the previous one. All we're doing is changing the title to report selection and the title inside the web page. The rest of the file is exactly the same. And we're going to replace this data tag with the HTML we want the user to see. So in our create index page function, we're going to set up two local variables, one to hold the HTML and one for the template. We will load the template exactly the way we did before. We will set the template file name as being our index.txt, and then we'll use our function in our common library to load the content of that file into the HTML variable, and then we will replace the data tag within that with the information we want to present back to our user, and we'll get that using another new function called getPages. And once that HTML variable is populated, we will then write it back to the browser, allowing it to display the web page. I've got a commented out call here to a piece of debug code which you can use during your development. The append to file function within our common files library allows us to take the content of any variable and put it out to a file. In this case, this will be a file on the web server. So let's create this new function. So the getPages version 1 function is going to return a string. This will be the content of our form we want to display to the user. So since we're using an HTML form, there is a construct we have to put together to tell the web browser what the form actually does, what it's called, and what it's going to display. So the first thing we'll need to do is to give the form a name. And the construct in HTML is form name equals, and then in quotes, the name of our form. Following that is the method we're going to be using. Now we're going to be using a post method in this case to post the information back to the browser that called. And then finally, you need to tell the browser what to do when the user clicks a submit button. In this case, we're just going to call the same application again, demo4.exe, and the browser will pass back not only the call to demo4, but it will also put in parameters following that. One parameter for each of the elements on the form we're about to display. So what do we actually want on our form? Well, we need to put something in the form that allows the user to select one of the two files. So one of the easy ways of doing that is to put a piece of text on the screen to ask them to select which report they wish, and then a drop-down list containing both of the files that we want them to select from. This is very easily done using the select name. So we give the drop-down list a name, in this case the name is report, and then we put options into that select, and these are the things we want the user to actually see. This is the text the user will see in the drop-down list, and this is the value it will pass back when the form is actioned on the web server. This way we can make the value that's passed back the name of the file we want the application to load. As with all of these, you'll find that there is a select open and a select close. And there's an option open and there's an option close. It's important to put these end tags in to allow the browser to know what it has to do. Having put that in place, that allows us to have a drop-down list. In addition, we need a button for the user to click on to allow the action to take place. We need an input type, in this case it's a submit button, again enclosed in double quotes. We want a title which will pop up on the button to allow people to see what the button actually does, in this case click here to request your report. And then finally we want a value, and this will be get report. And at the end of that we'll have to remember to put the closing tag in so that the browser knows that the input tag goes from here to here. And to finish off the form, we also need to have the close of the form statement. And now that we've got all the HTML in our HTML variable, we can now pass the value back to the calling function. And that should be that function complete. So if we compile that now to make sure it compiles cleanly, and we will copy that onto our web server. So we'll copy demo4.exe onto the web server. So we go into our browser now, and we're now going to call demo4.exe. And there is our web page. In calling demo4 with no parameters, it is defaulted to display this form. It has a drop-down list with two entries on it, one for no balances, one for balances, and we have a large get report button. Now at the moment that button does nothing. So we'll need to put some additional code in our application so that when the user clicks on this button, it will actually call the application and display our report. So we go back to our pbMain function. In our pbMain function, we had commented out this section here where each of the parameters was picked up. Let's just take that back out again. And what we were doing in here is we were looking to see the first parameter, and we were decoding what came in on the command line and putting it into this variable. However, let's have a look first of all to see what's actually sitting in that variable. What are we getting coming in on the CGI command? We can display that quite easily by using a write CGI command. So what we'll do here is use write CGI to pass out the str file parameter back to our browser, so we can see what comes in. So let's copy that onto the web server and see what we get. And if we run this again in our browser, we get a form, we click on get report, and this is what's coming in. This is our parameter. It's formed two sections, the name, an equal sign, and the value. So this is a name parameter we're now using. So to determine the value, we can actually test this. So once we've picked up the str file, which is the whole command, we can then use the parse command to work out if this is the statement we actually want. So we're testing the value based on the equal sign. So this is the first element of the string, and we're testing to see if it equals report. And if it does equal report, then we can parse out the second part of the command line, and we can put that value into str file. So if anything other than the word report appears, we will ignore it. Now we can copy out our debug code, and once we get down to this point, we can then display the index page that the user has given us. So we're using the function we already created, which is the create web page. So how the application will work now, it will look to see how many parameters have come in. If there is one or more parameters, it will look for the first parameter. If that first parameter is named report, it will take the value after the equal sign and put it into the str file variable. If there are no parameters, we will display the index page. So let's just compile that now and copy that onto the website. And we'll go back to our browser. We will run our program again. So there is our form. We can leave it at no balances. We can click on the Get Report button, which is our Submit button. And when clicked, it will display the list with all the account number details and no balances. If we hit the back button to go back to our form, change it to with balances, and then click Get Report, it will now display the form with balances on. So what we have done today is we have created a new executable, which is our CGI application, which when called with no parameters will display a form allowing the user to select which report they're actually wanting. When the user has picked the report, they will click on the Get Report button, and now that we have passed parameters to the same CGI application, it will take that parameter, extract the name of the file, and display the appropriate file to the user. On this form, there's a great deal of space below the Get Report button, more than enough to display our actual report. This would make this particular web page look quite interactive to the user. We can achieve this by using a technique known as Ajax. However, that's one for the next video. That's it for today. Thank you for watching.